something just happened, and it's something that could reshape the future of four of the most powerful English-speaking nations on Earth and shake Washington to its core. Because what started as a quiet petition just forced the hands of lawmakers. And now, a parliamentary debate is officially scheduled on the idea of forming a unified economic and political alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. It's called CANZUK, and if you've never heard of it before, you're not alone. Because while this concept has been whispered about for decades, today it's roaring into the spotlight, backed by over 250,000 citizens, growing momentum, and a level of seriousness we've never seen before. But here's where things get even more dramatic. The United States has taken notice, and behind closed doors in D.C., there's rising concern that this proposed alliance, if realized, could become a direct economic rival to America. So what exactly is CANZUK? Why is it suddenly being debated at the highest levels of government? And what does it mean for Canada's future and its relationship with the United States? Let's break it all down. First, let's talk about what CANZUK really means. The term is a fusion of four countries: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. For nations bound not just by language, but by a shared legal system, democratic institutions, economic models, military cooperation, and in many ways, a common identity. Together, these countries represent over 135 million people, a combined GDP of over $6.5 trillion, and more global influence than most major blocs outside of the US, China, or the EU. And now, after years of being treated as a far-fetched idea, the concept of forming a CANZUK Union, a loose federation or alliance, is being seriously discussed. This means potential freedom of movement, a unified foreign policy on global issues, even possibilities of shared military defense frameworks or consolidated trade structures. To many, it sounds like the next natural evolution of the Commonwealth. But to others, it's a geopolitical shift that could reduce America's leverage globally. The spark that reignited this: a citizen-led petition that began circulating online earlier this year. Its demand was simple: that the UK Parliament formally debate the merits of joining and leading discussions around a CANZUK alliance. To trigger a parliamentary debate in the UK, you need 100,000 verified signatures. This petition blew past that number in a matter of weeks. And by August 2025, it had crossed 250,000 signatures, forcing Parliament's hand. So now, in a historic move, a full debate is officially confirmed. Lawmakers will now be on record speaking for or against the idea of the UK initiating CANZUK negotiations. And this has Washington watching closely. So why is the United States concerned? To understand that, you have to understand how post-Brexit geopolitics have shifted. The UK has struggled to regain its global trade clout after leaving the European Union. Canada and Australia have both navigated tensions with the US over trade, energy, and climate. And New Zealand has increasingly pursued independent policies, especially around defense and digital sovereignty. But together, these four countries could form a new axis of influence, one that doesn't rely on Washington, and that may even counterbalance US power on the global stage. Think about it. A CANZUK alliance would create a bloc with massive energy reserves, dominance in critical minerals, advanced militaries, highly educated populations, and global geographic coverage from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Now imagine that bloc negotiating trade deals as a single unit. Imagine their militaries acting together in Indo-Pacific disputes without the US. Imagine their influence over emerging tech regulations, data privacy, or even global currency discussions. That's why some in the US establishment see CANZUK as a quiet threat, not in a hostile sense, but in a realignment of power where America isn't the only English-speaking superpower calling the shots. The most surprising thing? CANZUK isn't being pushed by radicals, but by mainstream policymakers. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has expressed public support. Several Canadian MPs from both Conservative and centrist parties have discussed its potential. The UK's Conservative Party has flirted with the idea since the Brexit vote. And even in New Zealand, where foreign policy is usually more reserved, there's growing interest. In fact, a CANZUK International poll conducted in late 2024 showed over 70% support in Canada, more than 65% in Australia, nearly 60% in the UK, and growing traction in New Zealand as well. This isn't just a fringe movement anymore. It's a mainstream idea with grassroots and parliamentary momentum. But the road ahead? Far from certain. Critics say the idea is romanticized nostalgia, a modern attempt to reassemble a colonial club. They argue that cultural, legal, and economic differences make such an alliance too complicated. And others warn that aligning too closely could risk isolating these nations from Asian, European, or American markets, where most of their current trade happens. Canada, for example, sends over 75% of its exports to the U.S. Would a stronger CANZUK bloc threaten that? And how would Washington respond to a bloc that signs energy, defense, or data-sharing deals without? According to sources close to U.S. trade officials, the White House is monitoring the situation carefully. Unofficial diplomatic messages have reportedly been sent to Ottawa, London, and Canberra, urging caution. And there are whispers, unconfirmed, that the U.S. may preemptively propose expanded bilateral trade deals to weaken CANZUK's appeal. In other words, the U.S. could try to counter the alliance before it even begins. Meanwhile, inside Canada, a quiet debate is starting to take shape. Should Canada lean further into its U.S. partnership or diversify its global ties by backing CANZUK? And it's not just policy. This touches identity. What kind of country does Canada want to be? A North American satellite forever dependent on Washington? Or a global middle power, building alliances with those who share its language, values, and outlook? That's the soul-searching question that this petition, this debate, and this movement has reignited. And for seniors, working families, and business leaders across the country, the outcome could affect trade, immigration, foreign aid, pensions, tech jobs, and energy exports. So here we are. The first formal parliamentary debate on CANZUK is now confirmed. The idea is no longer just an online theory. It's a legislative reality. And as this debate unfolds, the world, and especially the United States, will be watching every move. Because if this alliance takes shape, it could change not only how these four nations relate to each other, but how the entire global balance of power is structured. Will Canada step forward and embrace this bold new vision, one that could transform its global identity and reshape how it engages with the world? This isn't just about trade or diplomacy. It's about redefining Canada's long-standing role as a quiet middle power and stepping into a leadership position among nations that share its values, history, and democratic principles. Aligning with the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand through a CANZUK alliance could give Canada a powerful new platform, not only for economic growth, but for strategic influence. Together, these countries could form a modern democratic bloc that sets the tone for global standards in technology, defense, human rights, and climate policy. For many, it's an opportunity too big to ignore. But there's another reality Canada must face: the geopolitical weight of its southern neighbor. The United States is already watching closely. And beneath the surface, quiet pressure is building. Trade deals, intelligence cooperation, energy partnerships, all are now strategic levers Washington could use to remind Ottawa where its loyalties have traditionally been. For decades, Canada has maintained a careful balance between independence and cooperation. But CANZUK would force a different posture, one that suggests Canada is ready to lead on its own terms, even if that means stepping slightly out of America's shadow. That's a move Washington may not be ready to accept without resistance. And so, the question looms larger than ever. Will Canada lean into this moment of transformation? Or will it retreat into the comfort of the familiar, yielding to the subtle pressure of its most powerful ally? Only time will reveal how this story unfolds. But the debate is no longer theoretical. It's real, and it's happening now, in parliamentary chambers, in diplomatic circles, and in the hearts of citizens across the CANZUK nations. Something has shifted, and what happens next could redefine not just the future of these four countries, but the global balance of power for the 21st century. So don't look away. Stay informed, because history might be unfolding right now, and you deserve to know exactly what it means. Disclaimer: this video is for informational and discussion purposes only. It presents speculative analysis based on current events, political developments, and publicly available sources. The content should not be interpreted as official policy, legal advice, or confirmation of future government action. Views expressed are those of the narrator and do not represent any government, political party, or official institution. Always consult official sources for the most accurate and up-to-date information.